town of Burnt Creek, Wyoming, had a diagnosis for Clara Voss. It had arrived the way most diagnoses do in small towns. Not from a doctor, not from evidence, but from the slow accumulation of other people's discomfort dressed up as concern. Clara was 29 years old, and she was the only veterinarian within 40 miles of Burnt Creek in either direction. She had earned that fact a hard way, which was the only way she knew. She had left Burnt Creek at 17 with $70 and a letter of recommendation from the County Agricultural Extension Office, put herself through 4 years of pre-medicine at the University of Wyoming, working nights at a livestock auction house, then 4 more years at the Colorado State Veterinary College, where she was one of 3 women in her cohort and the only one who had grown up on a working ranch and therefore the only one who did not flinch when the work required flinching at. She had come back to Burnt Creek at 27 because her mother's hip had given out and because there was no one else, and because the nearest large animal vet was in Cheyenne and the ranchers in the Burnt Creek Basin were losing animals they could not afford to lose by the time the Cheyenne vet made the drive. She set up her practice in the old Sutherland building on the east end of Main Street, and she worked. That was what she did. She worked. The town's diagnosis, delivered over 2 years through the usual channels, the post office, the feed store counter, the pew conversations after Sunday services, was that Clara Voss was too serious, too focused, too much in her own head. She didn't socialize the right way, which meant she didn't socialize in ways that made people comfortable, which meant she sometimes said what she actually thought when what was actually thought was inconvenient. She had declined 2 invitations to join the ladies' auxiliary. She had told Ray Garrett, whose stallion she had saved from a gut impaction at 2 in the morning, that his ranch management was going to kill another horse inside of a year if he didn't change the feeding schedule, and she had said it in front of his ranch hands, which Ray Garrett had not forgiven. She was, the town concluded, a woman who did not understand her situation. Clara had her own understanding of her situation, which was that she was keeping animals alive and that the rest was not her department. She was fine. She told herself she was fine with the particular conviction of a person who has decided not to examine the conviction too closely. She had a dog named Birch and a wood stove and accounts that balanced every month and a view of the Big Horn foothills from the window above her desk. She had her mother 2 streets over and Sunday dinners that neither of them were very good at, but both of them showed up for. She had enough. She told herself she had enough. She was not entirely sure she believed it. He came to Burnt Creek in early March when the snow was still on the upper elevations and the roads in the basin were the particular mud that makes you question everything. His name was Reed Callahan, and he had taken the foreman position at the Decker operation 9 miles north, a sheep and cattle spread that old Warren Decker had been trying to run alone since his 2 sons had gone to Laramie and not come back, which was a situation that required either help or an ending, and Warren had chosen help. Reed Callahan had come from Montana. Before that, New Mexico. Before that, a ranch outside of Flagstaff that had gone under in the drought of 1889, which had sent a lot of good men looking for work in places they hadn't planned on. He was 36, lean in the way that outdoor work makes a person lean, with the kind of patience in his face that you see in people who have spent years working with animals that cannot be hurried. He came to Clara's office on his 3rd day in Burnt Creek because Warren Decker had a ewe that had been off feed for a week and was showing signs that Warren described accurately as wrong. Clara was in the examination room when he knocked. She came out with her sleeves rolled and her hair pinned up in the practical way she wore it when she was working, which was most of the time. "Dr. Voss," he said. "Yes," she said. "What are we dealing with?" He told her about the ewe. He told her clearly and in the right order. How long the symptoms had been present, what the animal had eaten, what her temperature had run, what her movement looked like. He did not embellish and he did not leave anything out. Clara had learned in 2 years of Burnt Creek practice that the quality of information a person gave you about a sick animal told you almost everything you needed to know about whether the animal was going to be all right. Most people gave you the information shaped by what they were afraid of, which meant pieces were missing. This man gave her the information straight. "I'll come up this afternoon," she said. 2 o'clock. "Appreciated," he said. He glanced at the framed degree on the wall. Colorado State, 1887. "Long way to come back to," he said. "Not a criticism, an observation." "It is," she said. He nodded once and left. She thought about the way he had described the ewe's symptoms the whole drive out to Decker's. The ewe had a wool block impaction complicated by early-stage pregnancy, which Clara diagnosed in 40 minutes, and which, if it had gone another week, would have killed both the ewe and the lamb. She explained this to Warren Decker and to Ree Callahan, who stood at the fence and listened with the focused attention of someone who is learning and knows it. When she was done, Reed asked 2 questions. Both were the right questions. "She'll be all right?" Warren said. "She'll be fine," Clara said. "I'll need to come back in 3 days to check on her." She looked at Reed. "You'll see changes in her behavior before then if something's going wrong. Here's what to look for." She told him. He remembered it. She could tell by the way he didn't write it down and also didn't ask her to repeat it. She drove back to Burnt Creek in the late afternoon with the Bighorn Range lit up orange and violet on the western horizon and something she couldn't quite name sitting in the passenger seat beside her, taking up space. She told it to move over. It didn't. He came by the office 4 days later, one day after she had gone back to check on the ewe, who was recovering well. He knocked on the open door and stood in the frame. "She's doing better," he said. "I wanted to let you know." "I know," Clara said. "I was there yesterday." "I know," he said. "I wanted to let you know anyway." She looked at him. He looked at her with the same directness he'd had in Warren Decker's field. No performance in it, no management of an impression. Just a man looking at a person he was interested in looking at. "Was there something else?" she said. He thought about this for a moment in a way that was honest rather than evasive. "I've been in Burnt Creek 8 days," he said. "I don't know anyone. I was hoping you might tell me who's worth knowing." It was so close to transparent that it looped around to being a kind of honesty. Clara recognized it. She leaned back in her chair. "The postmistress, Ada Horn," Clara said. "She knows everything and tells you only what you need. The blacksmith on the South Road is better than the one on Main Street, regardless of what Main Street charges. Warren Decker is a good man who is too proud to ask for help until a situation is past the point of comfort, so watch for that. The sheriff is honest. The town council is not dishonest, but they are slow, which has a similar effect." He listened. He didn't smile at the parts that were mildly funny, but his eyes changed, which was better. "Anyone I should avoid," he said. "Ray Garrett," she said. "He holds grudges, and he doesn't know enough to know what he doesn't know. That's a particular combination." "What about you?" he said. She looked at him directly. "What about me? Should I avoid you?" There was a pause in which Clara assessed the question and found that it was not what it might look like from the outside. It was a real question. He wanted a real answer. "Most of Burnt Creek would tell you yes," she said. "Why?" he said. "Because I say things that need saying," she said. "Some people find that easier to manage from a distance." He considered this. "That sounds like a recommendation," he said. She almost said something. She stopped herself and looked at her desk instead. "I have work," she said. "I know," he said. "Good afternoon, Dr. Voss." "Good afternoon," she said. She listened to his boots on the floor and the door closing, and then she sat in the quiet of her office for a minute that stretched out longer than a minute. Then she picked up her pen and went back to the chart she had been working on. She did it more slowly than she usually did. The town noticed. Small towns have a finely calibrated instrument for noticing, and Burnt Creek was no different. By the second week of March, it was observed that the new Decker foreman had been seen at Clara Voss's office twice, with no apparent livestock emergency. By the third week, it was observed that they had been seen talking on the step of her building on a Tuesday evening after her last appointment. Not for a long time, maybe 20 minutes, but standing in the way that people stand when they are not in a hurry to stop standing there. By the beginning of April, the collective machinery of Burnt Creek's opinion had begun to turn. It was Dora Finch at the dry goods store who said it most plainly to Reed Callahan, because Dora Finch believed in plain speech and also because she liked Reed and thought someone ought to tell him. "Clara Voss is a good woman," Dora said one afternoon when Reed was in for work gloves. "But she's not easy. She's got her ways, and she doesn't bend them for anyone. She's been here 2 years and she's still not settled in, not in the way people settle. She keeps herself separate." Reed picked up a pair of gloves and examined the stitching with the attention of a man examining gloves. "Keeps herself separate," he said, "or people have made it easier for her not to try." Dora looked at him. "She told Ray Garrett the truth about his horses," Reed said, "in front of people. That takes something." "It takes something," Dora agreed. "It takes not caring what people think." "Or caring more about the horses than about Ray Garrett's feelings," Reed said. He put the gloves down and picked up another pair. "Those aren't the same thing." Dora thought about this for the rest of the afternoon. There were others who tried, in the particular way of Burnt Creek, which was the way of genuine care wrapped around genuine limitation. Clara had turned down a man named Silas Prudhomme at 28, a rancher's son from the north end of the basin, pleasant enough, who had told her during the one dinner they had shared that she would probably want to slow down the veterinary work once they started a family. Clara had thanked him for dinner and walked home and never mentioned it again. But the town had formed its own account of the event, which involved Clara being difficult, and which ignored what Silas had actually said, which no one had actually asked him. She was, the town had decided, a woman who wanted too much. Clara's own accounting was different. She wanted someone who understood that the work was not a phase. She wanted someone who did not require her to make herself smaller to fit inside his understanding of what a woman's life should hold. She had not found that in Burnt Creek. She was not sure she would. She was wrong about that too. But she didn't know it yet. It was a Friday in April when it changed, the way these things usually change, not with any announcement, just with a small shift in what was already happening. Clara had a call at the Decker place, a different animal this time, a young bull that had gotten into wire fencing and needed suturing. She was there 2 hours, and Reed was there the whole time, handing her what she needed before she asked, holding the animal steady with a calm that transferred itself into the bull, the way calmness can when it's the real thing and not performed. When she was done and washing her hands at the barn pump, he said, "You haven't eaten." It was 5 in the afternoon. She had not eaten since 6 that morning, which was her frequent situation. "I'll eat when I get back," she said. "Warren's wife left food," he said. "There's enough." It was practical. That was why she said yes. They sat in Warren Decker's kitchen with the early spring light coming through the window over the sink and ate cold roast beef and bread, and Clara noticed that Reed ate the same way he did everything, without performance, without commentary, present to what was in front of him. "How long have you been doing this?" he said. 2 years here," she said. "Before that, a practice outside of Fort Collins, large animals. Before that, school." "You came back for your mother," he said. She looked at him. "Warren told you." "Warren told me your mother had trouble with her hip and you came back," he said. He said it like it was obvious, like of course you did, like that's what she would do. A pause. "He means it as the highest compliment." Clara looked at her plate. Something tightened in her chest and then loosened. "Burnt Creek isn't exactly what you trained for," Reed said. "No," she said, "but the animals are the same animals." She looked at the window. "And some things are worth coming back for." He didn't say anything. She became aware that she had said something more honest than she usually allowed in public, and she waited for the moment to become awkward. It didn't. He just let it sit there, the same way he let the bull settle, with patience, without pressing. "Why Montana?" she said. "Before this." "Work," he said. "Good outfit up there, but the owner sold and the new owners had their own people." He looked at the window. "I've been moving a long time." "Warren's spread is solid. It felt like a place worth staying." She looked at him. "You decided that after 8 days." "I decided it after 3, he said. "The other 5 were confirmation." She almost asked him what had confirmed it. She didn't. She looked at her plate and finished her bread, and they sat in Warren Decker's kitchen in the Friday evening, and it was comfortable in a way that Clara did not have a lot of experience with, and therefore took note of. On the drive back to Burnt Creek, the thing that had been sitting in the passenger seat of her truck was still there. She stopped trying to make it move. Later, she would not be able to say exactly when the visits to the Decker place began to have a quality that was not strictly professional. The work was always real. Animals always needed something, but somewhere in April it became true that she was not sorry when the work brought her to the North Road, and she thought Reed Callahan was not sorry either, and they both operated on this tacit understanding without making it explicit, in the way that people who are careful with things tend to handle what they don't yet have a name for. He learned things about her the way you learn things when you pay attention. He learned that she kept her equipment organized to a system that was logical if you understood it and baffling if you didn't. And he asked her once to explain the system, and she did, and he understood it, which she noted. He learned that she was sharp with people who wasted her time and patient almost without limit with animals. He learned that she had a particular quality of stillness when she was working on something difficult, hands moving, everything else in her quiet. That was one of the most focused things he had ever watched. She learned that he said what he meant and did not say things he didn't mean, which was rarer than it should have been. She learned that he had a way of noticing things without announcing that he had noticed them, so that you only found out later. She learned that animals trusted him quickly, which was the metric she trusted most. The town continued its accounting. People continued to tell Reed things about Clara that were meant to protect him and actually revealed more about the teller than about Clara. He listened to all of it with the same expression, which was attentive and unconvinced. It was a Wednesday in early May when the thing happened that mattered. Clara had a call on the far north end of the basin, a rancher named Briggs' sheep operation, a difficult lambing complication at the worst time of day, which was 3 in the morning. She handled it. The ewe and both lambs lived, which was not guaranteed, and which Clara had made happen with her hands and her training. And 3 hours of cold barn air and no sleep, she was driving back south in the gray before sunrise, following the ranch road back to the main track when her truck went into the mud on the west shoulder with a finality that made clear it was not coming out without help. She sat in the truck for a moment. She was exhausted, blood on her coat, mud on everything else. She considered her options. The nearest help was the Decker place, half a mile east. She didn't want to knock on his door at 5 in the morning. She knocked on his door at 5 in the morning. He answered it in his work clothes, which told her he had been up already, which was a working man's fact and not a remarkable one. He took in her coat and her face with one look. "How many?" he said. "3, she said. "You and both lambs. They made it." He opened the door wider. "Come in." She came into his kitchen. The foreman's house was small and orderly in the way that a person makes a space orderly when they are used to being its only occupant, and he put coffee on without asking. She sat at his table and felt the warmth of the stove on the cold that had settled into her. "My truck's in the mud," she said. "North quarter mile, west shoulder." "I'll get it out," he said. "I can pay." "Clara," he said. She stopped. He looked at her, not with pity. She would not have tolerated pity, but with the direct warmth that was simply his way, the same warmth he brought to everything he thought was worth his full attention. "Drink your coffee," he said. She drank her coffee. When the sun was up, he drove the farm truck out and pulled her truck free of the mud while she stood to the side and watched, and she noticed that he did it without drama and without making it a thing she should feel any particular way about. He just did it because it was the thing that needed doing. They drove back to his place in the 2 trucks, and she got out to thank him properly, and he was leaning against the farm truck with his arms crossed and something in his face that was different from his usual manner. Not less sure, but more considered, as though he had been working something out and had arrived at the end of it. "I want to ask you something," he said. "All right," she said. "I've been told a number of things about you since I arrived," he said. "That you're difficult, that you don't fit, that you've made it too hard on yourself by refusing to be easier for people." He looked at her steadily, I've watched you for 2 months. I've watched you work, and I've watched you think, and I've watched the way you are with animals that have no way to tell you what's wrong. And I can tell you that every one of those people was looking at the wrong thing." He paused. "You know what they were looking at?" She was very still. "They were looking at the parts of you that made them uncomfortable," he said, "and calling it a problem with you. And it isn't." The May morning was wide and cold and clear around them. A meadowlark was making its case from somewhere in the fence line. "Reed," she said. "I have been," he said, "in 3 states and more towns than I've kept count of, looking for. I didn't know exactly what I was looking for, which made it harder to find. I know what I was looking for now." He looked at her. "It's someone who does the work because the work matters. Someone who says what's true, even when what's true is inconvenient. Someone who knocked on my door at 5 in the morning rather than sit in a truck and wait and not ask for help, which took something, whether you think it did or not." She wanted to say something. She found she didn't have it immediately, which was unusual for her. "The town of Burnt Creek," she said finally, carefully, "will have opinions about this." "The town of Burnt Creek," he said, "has had opinions about you for 2 years that were wrong. I don't see why I should let that set my direction." Something moved through her chest that was large enough that she had to look at the fence line for a moment to get her bearings. "I have work this afternoon," she said. "I know," he said. "Tonight?" She looked at him. His eyes were steady and serious and entirely decided in the way that she recognized as the real thing because she had the same quality in herself and had been looking, without knowing she was looking, for someone who had it too. "Tonight," she said. That was how it started. Or rather, that was when it became true in words, because it had been true in other ways for longer than either of them had admitted to themselves, which is usually how these things go. They spent the spring evenings the way people do when they have finally found a conversation worth having, on the step of her office building when the day was done, at Warren Decker's table when the work kept them both late, on the long drives back from the far reaches of the basin when she needed 2 people to manage a difficult call, and he had become, without any formal arrangement, her second pair of hands when the situation required it. He learned the names of her instruments. She learned the layout of the Decker spread. They talked the way you talk when you are not performing a version of yourself for consumption, which is to say they talked honestly and sometimes bluntly and occasionally disagreed in a way that did not require anyone to back down, just to think. They were married in August, which gave the town of Burnt Creek a significant event to process. The wedding was small. Clara had no appetite for elaborate, and Reed had been to enough places to know that the ceremony was not the point. The thing being promised was the point, and the simpler the ceremony, the clearer the promise. They did it in the courthouse in the presence of the justice of the peace, Clara's mother Edna, who had been watching the situation develop from her chair by the front window of her house on Sycamore Street, with the deep satisfaction of a woman who has hoped for something long enough to wonder if she was wrong to hope, and Warren Decker, who served as Reed's witness and who said afterward, with the economy of a man who has done the math, that he had known since the conversation about Ray Garrett's horses. Dora Finch, who had said what she had said in the dry goods store about Clara keeping herself separate, baked them a pie and brought it to the clinic and did not mention the conversation, which was the right call and showed good sense. Ray Garrett did not have opinions on the subject because Ray Garrett's opinion had not been solicited. Clara kept her practice. She expanded it. With Reed at the Decker place, she found that the calls to the north end of the basin were easier to manage, not because he made them easier, but because having someone who understood the work meant she came home to a kitchen where the things she said about the work landed correctly, where she did not have to translate. He had started handling the basic triage calls himself, learning quickly, coming to her with the cases that needed her training, which was the right boundary, and one they had established without argument because they thought about these things the same way. Burnt Creek's collective opinion underwent the gradual revision that small-town opinions undergo. Not announced, not acknowledged, just slowly replaced. The word that came to sit beside Clara Voss's name, which was Clara Callahan, now though she kept Voss on the clinic sign because it was the name she had earned it with, was capable. Said with the town's approval, which she had not sought and did not require, but which was there nonetheless. She rode out on calls in all weather and at all hours and came back with the animals alive more often than not. She trained a girl from the south end of the basin, 16 years old and sharp as wire, who wanted to know what Clara knew and whom Clara taught the same way she had taught herself, directly, without condescension, with the belief that the information was the important thing and not who was receiving it. She and Reed had supper every night they were both in Burnt Creek, which was most nights. They had disagreements that were the kind that make things better rather than smaller. They had the particular ease of two people who have found that the other person's silence is not empty, which is one of the rarest things, rarer than people say, and more valuable. On a Tuesday morning in October, 14 months after Reed Callahan had first knocked on the door of her clinic on the east end of Main Street, Clara was doing the accounts at her desk. The same desk, the same window, the same view of the big-horn foothills that she had had when she had told herself she had enough. And she found that the accounting was different now. Not because the material facts had changed so much. The clinic was the same clinic. Burnt Creek was still Burnt Creek, with all its limitation and its smallness and its considerable capacity for wrong opinion. But the thing that had been sitting in the passenger seat of her truck, the thing that she had tried to make move over, the thing she had named finally as the shape of what she had not found and had stopped expecting to find, it had a name now, and it came home every evening and hung its coat on the hook by the door and asked her how the afternoon had gone and listened to the answer. The town of Burnt Creek would tell you, if you asked, that Clara Callahan had always been right where she needed to be. They would say this with the confidence of people who had always believed it. They would not mention the revision. That's the thing about small towns. They revise without receipts. But Reed Callahan knew, and Clara knew, and sometimes, late in the evenings when the stove was going and the accounts were done and Birch was asleep at her feet, she would look across the table at the man who had knocked on her door and said, "What are we dealing with?" before he even knew her name. And she would think, he saw it first and said it plainly and did not flinch. That had been enough to change everything. I've thought about that a lot. The one Clara pulled through at 2 in the morning, alone in a cold barn, with no one watching and no one waiting. She didn't do it for recognition. She did it because the animal needed her to, and because she was the person who could, and because that was enough reason. That's the part that stays with me. There's a version of Clara's story where she softens herself just enough to fit. Takes the dinner with Silas Prudett and doesn't say anything when he talks about slowing down the work. Learns to make herself smaller in rooms where she's making people uncomfortable. A lot of women do this, not because they're weak, but because the pressure is constant and the cost of holding your shape gets high. I understand the math of it. But Clara didn't do it, and watching what that cost her, and then watching what it returned to her, I keep coming back to the same thing. The choices you make about who you're willing to be are the ones that determine what finds you. That's not magic. It's just cause and effect, playing out slowly enough that we mistake it for luck. What Reed saw in Clara wasn't potential she hadn't realized yet. It was exactly what was already there: the competence, the honesty, the willingness to say the inconvenient true thing when an animal's life depended on it. He saw it because he was looking for it, and he was looking for it because he had the clarity of mind to know what actually mattered in a person, after enough years and enough distance to have figured that out. Two people finding each other requires both of them to have done some work first. Clara had done hers. Reed had done his. That's not a coincidence. That's how it works. I think about the 3 things that got Clara through. Not through the marriage, through everything before it. The years alone. The drive back to Burnt Creek when she didn't have to come. The 2 in the morning barn calls. The moment she told Ray Garrett the truth in front of his ranch hands, knowing what it would cost her socially because the alternative was another horse dying on a preventable schedule. The first thing was character. The willingness to do the right thing even when the room is watching and the right thing isn't popular. Clara had that from the beginning. It wasn't taught to her by anyone in Burnt Creek. She arrived with it. The second thing was the intelligence to learn what she needed to learn and then use it. She didn't wait for someone to teach her. She ordered the book from Chicago. She put herself through school. She asked the right questions and remembered the answers. That kind of mind is not passive. It goes looking. The third thing was the endurance to keep going when the returns weren't there yet. 2 years in a town that had already formed its opinion. 2 years of being the woman who didn't quite fit the shape they had cut for her. She didn't leave. She didn't harden into bitterness. She just kept doing the work, because the work was real and the animals were real, and that was something she could stand on. Those 3 things together, the character, the mind, the staying power, those are what made the ending possible. Reed didn't create them. He recognized them. And recognition, given clearly and without condition, turns out to be one of the rarest things one person can offer another. Clara already knew her own worth. She just hadn't met anyone yet who knew it too.